Hello, and welcome to a special episode of the Strees Knits podcast. My name is Stacy, also known as Strees Knits Yarn over on Instagram and Strees Knits on Ravelry. So, this is my first video outside of the podcast that I will be doing for the next few weeks. So, I thought it would be fun to start with a Q&A, just in case there are new viewers who don't know much about me, or answering some questions that you've been wondering about for a while. So I have my notebook. I broke it down into 3 categories. So I have knitting, dyeing, and life. So I'm going to start with knitting, move into dyeing, and end with life. So that's really how this goes. So the first question is, how and why did I start knitting? So I started knitting in 2013, the end of 2013. Yes, because it was Thanksgiving break. So I was a resident advisor my sophomore through senior year at my university at Marshall. So I was a resident advisor, and before breaks we had to go through all of the rooms in our building and check to make sure, like people took garbage out, unplugged things that didn't need to be plugged in, set the thermostat to a certain temperature, make sure they didn't have like drugs or guns or things just kind of sitting out, things that we could see without going through their stuff that they shouldn't have. And you'd be surprised what people leave out. It's kind of shocking. So on one of my rounds of room checks before Thanksgiving break that year, I saw somebody that had yarn and knitting needles, and I was like, I tried to learn how to crochet from my grandma on my dad's side. His mom, she was an avid crocheter, and she tried to teach all of us at one point, and the closest thing that I had come to being successful is I just did a chain stitch over and over and over. There's actually a picture of me. I was probably like 5 or 6, and I had the worst mullet ever because it took a really long time for my hair to grow on the sides. So I had a mullet. I was in this like weird sweat pant thing, and I'm just like smiling in crochet. This really, really long chain. So I was like, maybe I'll get into that. But I was like, knitting sounds interesting. So since we were the only ones in the building and I really didn't have much to do because classes were on hold and it was break, so I started watching knitting tutorials, and I saved a bunch of them, and I also started watching knitting podcasts. And the first ones that I watched was Kristen of Vine, Yarngasm at the time, and the Knit Girls, Leslie and Laura. And yeah, so I just got really into it, and I got home from West Virginia, and that night I was like, Mom, we have to go to Michael's. I have to go get yarn and needles. And so we went, and I bought chunky gray yarn and really big straight needles. They were size 17, so like bright green. And I tried to knit a scarf with 90 yards of a chunky, super bulky, something in that range weight, and it did not work, and it also went like this. And yeah, so went back a few days later and bought more yarn and just kept going and kept learning, and eventually moved to circular needles and tried to knit a hat, and it came out more like a yarmulke. Because I didn't understand gauge, I didn't understand anything. So eventually, towards the end of my sophomore year, I got pretty good at it and kept knitting and knit my first pair of socks and sweaters, and eventually started the knitting podcast my senior year of college. So that's how I got into knitting. As to why I got into knitting, I just wanted something to do. I am a very anxious person. I'm always really stressed out, thus Strees Knits. So it just made sense to do something with my hands. I'm also a kinesthetic learner. There are the 4 types of learner, so like audio, visual, I feel so stupid right now. Kinesthetic and there's something else. Or maybe it's just 3. I don't remember. Oh, that's so bad. I don't know why I don't remember that. But I'm a kinesthetic learner, so I learn better when I'm moving and things just get retained better, which is why like when I take notes instead of typing them out, I write them. Same thing, I started taking knitting to lectures and my grades went way up. So there's that. Next question. How did I get into test knitting? That's a good question. I don't remember. I think the first test knit I ever did was the throwback cardigan by Andrea Mowry. And I just applied to do it and I got picked. And that's basically been what I've done. So I tried to take pictures with good lighting and good representation of products and colors. I'm really lucky to have Doug, who will take pictures for me and capture me in really good ways because he knows me very well and makes me feel very comfortable in front of a camera. So yeah, I don't know, I just applied and got picked. That's about it. How do I pick patterns and the yarns for the patterns? So I pick things that I'm going to wear. I used to be very into what everybody else was knitting and realized very quickly that it didn't make me happy. I didn't use my items that I knit. So in the past like 2 years, I've just kind of gone, what will I wear? What colors do I like? And then that's pretty much it. So like for me, I like positive ease. I like simple silhouettes. I don't like lace very much. And I like neutrals, pastels with pops of darker colors. So I just kind of stick to that, and if I like something that has come out recently and is trendy, then I'll knit it. But if it's trendy and I want to knit it just to knit it, and I know that I won't wear it, I try to hold off on it. And there have been times that I've come around. For example, I'm trying to think of something that I've come around on. I don't remember. The Find Your Fade shawl. So originally I didn't know how I felt about it, and it took me finding the perfect color combination, which is for me a pink to mint green fade, and then I loved it and I wore it all the time until I made a different faded object, which I'll talk about in a second. Where do I find time to knit? I get this question a lot. So yes, I don't have a whole lot of access time. I am a stay-at-home mom, and I also work from home. I run my own business, so a lot of my time goes into those two things, but I find time here and there. So I like to keep simple projects on the needles the majority of the time, so that let's say Eliza and I are watching a movie, I can knit on that if she's enthralled in the movie, or if she's really into playing by herself, I will also grab my knitting and just have it, but it has to be a project where I can just throw it down. So like if I'm doing increases or decreases on a raglan, I won't touch it, or a yoke. I will not bring that to where, because if I have to throw it down and I don't know if I'm on an increase round or not, it does not go well. I don't bring brioche around her because she's pulled it out before, which is not her fault at all. Yeah, so I do that, and then I try to give myself, when she's napping, a little bit of time. So like I'll eat lunch and then give myself like 20 minutes, and that's sometimes time that I will pick up needles. Sometimes I don't do that though, and I just work through her nap. And then at night, if I'm not working, I'll be knitting. Yeah, so it's just fitting it in where I can. Yeah. Sometimes I stay up much later than I should, like 3 in the morning to knit, because that's the only me time that I have. Yeah, so it kind of depends. Dream knits. This is hard. So I got dream knits and bucket list knits. So this has evolved over time. At one point, Andawa by Michelle Wong was like, holy grail, I need to knit that. I still really want to knit it. But it's not the top of my list anymore, which is really shocking. So right now, the top of my list is a Shifty by Andrea Mowry. I am slowly collecting yarn for it, and I just swatched for it, and hopefully that will be on the needles in the fall, maybe winter next year, next year. So I'm excited. But yeah, that's really the only thing that's like at the top of my list. Yeah. But also Andawa by Michelle Wong. Favorite finished object. So I have 2, and I brought them over. So if you have followed me at all, you will know what these 2 are. So the first one is my Woodwardia, which I've worn all the time. I need to wash it because I got some coffee on it when we were in Chicago. But this is Woodwardia by Lydia Gluck. Sorry, just got a message. Woodwardia by Lydia Gluck. It was in Pom Pom Quarterly, spring 2019. It's a little wrinkly. But yeah, so this is my favorite sweater I've ever made. I wear it all the time. And I will definitely be knitting 1 or 2 more of these as the years go on. And then, like, my all-time favorite project that I need to pill is my What the Fade shawl by Andrea Mowry. So I've talked about this at great length for years, ever since I knit it. So it came out in 2017. So here's my What the Fade. I love it. It's my favorite thing I've ever made. I used my yarn out for Woodwardia. I used my DK base in the My Jam colorway. And in this, I used my singles base, and I used, well, there's some leaves in it, probably from Rhinebeck. Let's go from the edge. So I used, this is a 6-color fade. So I used My Jam into Sweet Disposition, into I Smell Snow, into Birch, into Bell Jar, into Pillow Mint. So it is a pink mint fade, which is my absolute favorite. And yeah, I wear this almost every day in the winter. It's perfect. I've been thinking about knitting another one because you start with this beautiful brioche section, and then it's just miles and miles of garter. But I love it. It's my favorite thing. Next question is most challenging knit. So this is going to sound funny because it's not a hard knit at all. But for some reason, I cannot get it right. And that is The Weekender by Andrea Mowry. Now, no one else has had issues with this pattern, but I've knit 2 so far. So the first one, my Kitchener, my tubular bind off at the neckline was too tight. It doesn't feel good on my neck. So that one is going to be given away or something. But the second one I knit, I got off on the center slip stitch because there's a slip stitch up the front and off the back. And for some reason, the front, of course it was the front, went like this. And I was like, it won't bother me. It'll be fine. It bothered me a lot. I don't even know what I did with the yarn. Like, I just put it out of my mind. I don't know why. It's a very simple pattern, very well written pattern. A lot of people have knit it with no issue. I don't know what my problem is. I don't know. But I just ordered yarn for my third. And so we'll see. See if it works. I hope it does, because I love that sweater. It's the perfect sweater. And then the last question in the knitting section is, what are my favorite tools and or notions? So fun fact, there's a video on my channel telling you all about them, but I'll tell you a few. So the first thing is my wool and honey pouch. I got this in 2017 when Doug and I went to Traverse City and we stopped at Wool and Honey. They're in Leland, Michigan, the very top. My favorite needles are Addy Turbo Rockets. I love Tuft Woolen products, so that's another favorite thing. So this is my hand balm, and I also love their sock soap. What else do I love? I love metal bulb stitch markers, my chibi. These scissors that I found that I'm obsessed with, they're from a fabric store in England, and I ordered this color, a mint, and a yellow. I love them. They're so sharp. Love them. Yeah, but if you want more info on my favorite notions and tools, there is a video on my YouTube channel. I'll link it below so you can find it pretty easily. And I also love my gauge, rulers, and needle gauge from Twig and Horn. So there's that. Let's move into dyeing. First question, am I doing advents this year? Yes, I am doing advents for 2020. They will go on sale April 16th, 2020. Yes, so yes, I am doing that. Stupid straw. Okay. Are there any dyeing resources that you recommend to new dyers? Yes. Nicole of Hue Loco has a bunch of videos about dyeing, as well as Jinx, who sadly no longer dyes anymore. I think it's under Jinx Handmade now, but it was originally the Dyer's Notebook. So those are the two dyeing tutorials that I recommend highly. There are plenty out there, but I'll also give you a few of my tips. One, safety, gloves, mask. Use them. I don't always use gloves because I've had issues with allergic reactions to talc powder, and then gloves without talc powder don't fit very well and they kind of hurt. So I'm personally looking for gloves that I like, where I feel like I can still manipulate things the way I need to while keeping my hands safe. So that's the thing that I'm struggling with right now, but please use masks. Dye powder is incredibly toxic and gets everywhere. So do that. Thoroughly clean where you're working before and after. Don't go into dyeing wanting it to be a business. I don't think that's a smart thing to do, because one, there's a lot of businesses, and two, you might not like it. Don't go into it renovating space in your garage or basement or a room to be a dye studio if you haven't started yet. It's putting the cart before the horse kind of thing. Dyeing is a lot of hard work, and yeah, and it's hard, and it always kind of frustrates me when people are like, it's super easy, anyone can do it. It's so frustrating. It took me a long time to kind of find my own voice in dyeing yarn, and I definitely think anybody who wants to dye yarn should try it. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, but don't go into it. Don't dye yarn specifically to make it a business, right? It's like, because if you don't love it, it's it's not worth it if you don't love it. Secrets. Okay, I'm gonna spill some secrets. There's a lot that goes into making a dye business run, between shipping labels, shipping supplies, supplies for dyeing in general. Not only the dyes, but what you use to mix dyes, what you use to speckle if you choose to speckle, cleanup gear, pots or pans depending on how you dye, citric acid, vinegar, whatever you use. It's a lot. And yeah, I was watching an interview and somebody was just like, it's super easy, I don't understand why people say it's hard. And it made me so mad, because after you spend 12 to 18 hours on your feet dyeing, it's a lot of work. But it is fun if you like it. So if you like it and you want to make a business out of it, go for it. I believe in you. But try it before you start anything, because it's a lot. I hope that wasn't rude. I'm kind of regretting that. Okay. Anyway, am I ever going to dye non-superwash? So I did dye non-superwash back in the day. Probably about 2 years ago. No one bought it. And I use this as income. This is how I pay some bills and like student loans. Yeah, so if something doesn't sell, I just don't sell it anymore. Like, I used to have a sport weight that I love. I love my sport weight, but I don't put it in the shop anymore because it sat around for a year without anyone buying it. And then, yeah, so it's just based on demand. No, I don't think I will be dyeing non-superwash anytime soon. It's also difficult to speckle, but if you are, I will put this out there, I do have a non-superwash base that I love. And if you are wanting Strees Knits tonals on non-superwash, then I will make that happen for you. But I also, there are plenty of other dyers who do non-superwash. My personal favorite is Sweet Sparrow. Her and I have very similar aesthetics, so if you are interested in that, I would also recommend looking at Julie's yarn. What inspired me to start dyeing? So I needed something to do. I was bored. I couldn't find a job after I graduated college, and my building director for my last year of being an RA, for my graduation gift, he bought me a yarn dyeing starting kit, because I talked about how I always thought it'd be really interesting to see how it worked, and I fell in love. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm very into a specific color palette, and I couldn't really find exactly what I wanted. When I started dyeing, it was very much about the neon yarns, which is just not my thing at all. So I started dyeing yarn, and people asked me to start selling it, so I did. And that's just it. I feel very lucky to have this so that I can stay at home with Eliza while still paying bills, which is really good. Yeah, that's how I started dyeing. I'm still dyeing in kitchen. I started dyeing in my parents' kitchen and moved to Doug's kitchen before we lived together, before we got married, and then just in our kitchen. Nothing fancy, just dyeing what I like to knit with. Yeah, I just wanted really good pinks and mints, so that's what I made. What is my typical work schedule? So this changes depending on what needs to be done. So a dye day is me dyeing yarn all day. I try not to do it when it's just Eliza and I try to have my mom come over and watch her, or if it's the weekend, Doug hangs out with her. Sometimes he'll take her on errands with him or over to his parents' house. I don't love having her around when I dye, but sometimes it's necessary. So usually I'll start dyeing around 10 or 11 in the morning, and I won't get done until about 3 in the morning the next day. And then I clean up, and that's that. So, and if I dye from about 10 to 3, so 10 a.m. to 3 a.m., that's probably a good 130 skeins. A lot of my yarn has to be dyed individually. That's just how it works. And I don't have the setup to do it any other way. So it takes a long time to dye speckle colorways. Like Sweet Disposition is one of the most labor intensive colorways I dye. Yeah, so like that takes a long time. My darker tonals like Mountain Mama are a pain in the butt, but I love them. So those are always the last things that I dye. Or if Eliza's around, I'll dye a bunch of like light tonals, things that go pretty quickly. And then when she starts waking up, I'll put the last layer of like Mountain Mama on and let it sit for like the few hours that Eliza's up. And then when she's back down, I rinse it out and probably put another layer on it because it didn't work. Yeah, so that's a dye day. But a normal day, so I wake up with Eliza between 8 and 10. It just kind of depends on her schedule. She is my alarm clock. I'm not a morning person. I don't know if you knew that about me. I despise mornings. When I was a barista and I had to wake up and be at work at 4 in the morning, hated it. 8 a.m. classes, the worst. So not a morning person. Much more of a night owl. So I let Eliza wake me up when she is ready. She's really good about that. So when she starts crying, I wake up and I get her. We spend the morning playing. Sometimes we watch a movie. Sometimes we go for a walk. And then it's lunch and nap time. And once nap time hits, I pack orders, I podcast, I twist yarn, I label yarn, just kind of whatever needs to get done. And then some social media stuff, taking pictures, writing Patreon posts, all of that. And then she wakes up and we continue our day together. Yeah, and then once she goes to bed between, it's around 8 o'clock now, I eat dinner, well, we eat dinner, Doug and I, and then he goes and works in his office and I work in my office, and usually at night, that's when I'm writing Patreon posts, coming up with ideas for videos. Sometimes I'll just dye 20 to 50 skeins of yarn if I can. Yeah, it just kind of depends on what needs to get done, and I just find those hours in the day to do it. Sometimes I have to stay up really late into the wee hours of the morning, like 4 or 5 in the morning, and then sleep for a few hours and wake up with Eliza. But it's the only way to get it done and still feel like I am being present for Eliza, so it's just, yeah. That's really my typical work day. Just whatever needs to get done, I fit it in where I can. How do I come up with prices? It seems like most indie dyers have the same price. So I did come in looking at other people's prices, knowing how much I feel comfortable, like how much money I'm willing to pay for a skein of yarn, even knowing like the work going into it. There are things like I don't love when yarn is above $30, so it's like, okay, I know I want to keep it below $30. And then I did a bunch of math to figure out where my profit margin needed to be to keep the business replenishing itself. So I buy my yarn with the profits from the previous update, and then also pay myself after that happens. So I needed to figure out the price, and for me right now that's $26 for most of my bases, and then $28 for my fuzzy bases, and $30 for my cashmere base, which I am going to start dyeing again, which I'm really excited about, and mini skein kits. So that's where prices come from. It was just doing a lot of math and trying to figure out how to keep it as low as possible, but also paying bills. Where do I find colorway inspirations? So this is actually a thing I've been doing on my Patreon, is I'm showing inspiration pictures that Doug and I have taken of certain things and showing you the colorway and talking through where I find inspiration. So most of that inspiration comes from music, nature, shows, books, just kind of everywhere, everything I like. Yeah, it's just kind of all around me, and there are definitely times where I'm like, I need to take a picture of that so I can make it a colorway. I've been that person. Or sometimes I'm even packing orders and seeing what people put together, and I'm like, these colorways need to be in a colorway together. Or yeah, it just kind of depends. It kind of comes from everywhere, and when I find it, I write it down, or I immediately dye it right then and there to keep it. And the last question in the dyeing section is dreams for Strees Knits yarn. So this is difficult because this was never what I expected my life to be. I would love to keep doing shows, but it's difficult when I have a toddler to keep in mind. So traveling a lot is hard, but also all of the festivals and everything are out of state. There's not really much in Michigan. I would love to do trunk shows, but I don't know. I don't feel like I'm a big enough dyer to do that kind of thing. And I also would eventually love to do, to vend at something around Rhinebeck. I think that would be a lot of fun, whether it's India Untangled, which I mean, I doubt. Because again, I'm not a big enough name for that, but yeah, if any of the other before events want vendors, I would love to do that. I loved vending at SSK. I hope to do that again. So I just love to continue doing shows. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, and I just hope to keep growing. That's really it. I'm not trying to be like the biggest name ever in knitting, but I just would really love for people to love my yarn. That's really it. That's my dreams. I just want people to love my yarn. Okay, so the last section is life. This is my favorite question. How did I name Esther and Eliza? So where did those names come from? So Esther comes from The Bell Jar. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath is my favorite book of all time, and the main character is Esther Greenwood, and when we picked up Esther, I was trying to think of a name. I love human names for dogs, and Esther just looked like Esther. I don't know. So that's how Esther got her name, who's my pug puppy, and Eliza. So there have been things since this that have solidified my love for the name Eliza, and those things being like Hamilton and My Fair Lady, all of that stuff. But the first time, this is so embarrassing, but I was a big fan of the Wild Thornberrys, that TV show, when I was younger on Nickelodeon, and the main character is Eliza Thornberry, and I've loved that name ever since I was a kid. And so when Doug and I were talking about names, I mentioned Eliza, and it just stuck. So that's how Eliza got her name. I fell in love with it as a kid, and over the years, I've come into contact pop culturally with the name over and over again, and yeah, that's how Eliza got her name. How did you and your husband meet? So Doug and I met. This is my favorite story. So we met in middle school band. We met in concert band, which is the 8th grade band. I was in 6th grade because I was really good. And he was in 7th. He's also really good. He's better than I am. And we were in the percussion section together. I am a percussionist. I played drums in drumline. I was center snare my senior year. But yeah, that's how we met. We met in middle school band in the percussion section. And yeah, we became best friends very quickly. And I liked him the entire time. Yeah, so middle school band, that's how we met. Do you have siblings? I have 2 older sisters, and then both of them are married, and I consider my brother-in-laws to be brothers, especially my brother-in-law Alex, my oldest sister's husband. I've known him since I was 7 or 8, and I'm 26 now, so he feels just like a brother, and my other brother-in-law Carlos feels the same way. Dream vacation. That's hard. Another question I got about vacations is if time and money weren't an issue, dream vacation. So going off that, I would love to just take a year and just travel around the world. That's the dream. Literally everywhere. I would love to go everywhere. My dream vacation, in reason, like that's probably doable. That's so hard because there's so many places that I want to go. But Doug and I have been talking about Europe for a while, and specifically Italy. I would probably just eat all the cacio e pepe ever and drink wine and look at all the architecture. Yeah, but Italy, I would also love France because I could get through France a little bit because I have a little bit of conversational French. Not much, don't ask. I'm horrible at it. But I think I could get through France pretty well without being the worst. So I think those are like the big 2, Italy and France. Yeah, I don't know, it's hard. I want to go everywhere. Yeah, like my dream would be Istanbul, but I don't know how realistic that is. I love Istanbul. Okay, anyway. If you weren't an indie dyer, what would you be doing? So funny you asked, because I'm taking steps to do this. I really would love to be a counselor, therapist, whatever you want to call them, but the degree is counseling. So I'm actually currently applying to a master's program. I have no idea if I'm going to get in. It's a very competitive program. They only accept 8 people. So I'm currently working on that application, but I would love to be a therapist. My dream is to have my own practice that specializes in women's issues, specifically like women traumas, from birth to loss in birth or infertility, sexual abuse, assault, all of those things. I have a passion of learning about and trying to treat people. And yeah, so like my capstone in college was on the neurobiological trauma and sexual assault victims. And yeah, so doing that and working with a rape crisis center in college, and then all of my experience with high-risk pregnancies and miscarriage and all of that, I've just grown a huge passion for that. So that's the dream. Hopefully it'll happen. So there's that. And the last question is, greatest achievement is my daughter. It's so stupid, but literally greatest achievement. She is the best, and I feel very lucky. Outside of that, owning my own business, which is really cool, and graduating college was also pretty great. So yeah, and I do consider Eliza an achievement because it was very difficult to get her here and to get her here well. So yeah, but that's all of the questions. I hope I answered some questions that you've had. I hope I hope this is good. I'm going to go get Eliza and go on a walk because it looks like rain is coming. So I hope you are having a wonderful day, and I will talk to you next time. Bye!